Kyrgyzstan Global Compass. So they are a great representative there locally to offer you support with any of your questions regarding Kaplan Medical. And they were nice enough to schedule this session for medical students and doctors about the pathway to getting medical residency in the US. I am our Senior Director for International Programs at Kaplan. I have worked with international medical students for over 12 years, so I'm very excited to have this session and really help answer your questions and talk a little bit more about how Kaplan can help you on your journey. So I want to encourage you, please ask your questions. We will get to as many as we can. I chose to share my slides today so we can go over a lot of information, but unfortunately that means with Facebook Live you can't see my face, but I can still see your questions. So please ask them in the chat and we will dive right in. So our goals for today are really to talk about why obtain medical licensure in the US, what are the benefits, really help you navigate your way through the application process, understand the timeline, and then also talk through the USMLE exams, which are a big hurdle along the way for international medical graduates. And obviously, we are in a very interesting time for medical education and the world right now in everything that's going on with the global pandemic. So, obviously now more than ever, the need for doctors to get trained and get specialized is apparent. And it's also put a lot of challenges on students with regards to their career and their future. So a lot of obstacles that international graduates have to overcome as always. But today we're going to really talk about how to maximize your chances, how to make sure you're putting yourself in a position to be successful. Okay, so why obtain medical licensure in the US? Obviously it's your chance to train and specialize at a high level, but also doctors in the US earn at a very high rate. When you're doing your residency training in the US, you are paid a salary. It's competitive salaries in the US, anywhere from $50,000 to $70,000 per year. But upon completion of your residency, US doctors are some of the highest paid around the world. So you definitely have the potential to earn, and that's important. Also, we need international medical graduates in the US. I'm not sure how many of you know this, but currently 25% of the doctors that work in the US are internationally medically trained doctors. So a fourth of our doctors went to medical school overseas. And the American Association of Medical Colleges is predicting a shortage over the next 10 years, a shortage of general care doctors and a shortage of surgeons and specialists. So we're going to continue to need more and more international graduates to fill that gap. This is the number of non-US international medical graduates that have matched into residency over the past 10 years. So you can see we've had a pretty steady growth of doctors joining the US healthcare system over that time period. In 2019, over 4,000 non-US international graduates matched into residency. So they always break up the data into two categories: US international graduates and non-US international graduates. A US international graduate means you're a US citizen or you have your green card, but you went to medical school overseas. Non-US international medical graduate means you don't have your green card, you're not a US citizen. So over 4,000 non-US citizens successfully got started with their residency training last year. And the match for 2020 actually just happened, and the numbers continue to grow, and we continue to see high success rates for international graduates, which we'll talk more about. But 2019, over 4,000, that's the most ever, the most in history, international medical graduates getting started with their residency program in the US. Growth of doctors. So helping you really navigate your way through this process is where Kaplan comes in. A lot of people think of Kaplan and they think of the USMLE exams, which is a big part of it, but we really help our students with every part of this process. So it can seem overwhelming. You see these terms like ECFMG, ERAS, NRMP, and you may not know where to begin. International graduates, the very first thing that you're working your way through is ECFMG certification. ECFMG stands for the Education Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates. They are the ones that approve you to take USMLE. So if you want to become a resident in the US, you are registering through ECFMG, you create an account, and they give you the ability to take USMLE Step 1, Step 2 CK, and Step 2 CS. Once you finish those exams, you're then considered ECFMG certified, and you're ready to apply for the match. Now, you apply for the match through a system called ERAS, the Electronic Residency Application Service. It's basically a nice, neat way for you to apply to residency programs in the US. So you upload your scores, your transcripts of medical school, letters of recommendation, a personal statement, which is a one-page essay that you write, any experience, any awards, you put it all onto your application, and then you apply to different residency programs. So you have to think, okay, well, what specialty do I want to apply to? You can apply to more than one. You don't just have to pick one. And then you have to think about what hospitals in that specialty do I want to apply. So you apply to your programs. Hopefully you get a lot of interviews, and then you enter the match. Now, the match only happens one time a year in the US. It happens every year in March. Applications are submitted in September. So it's really important, in addition to planning your study plans for the USMLE exams, planning your match calendar and making sure you're on track and ready to apply by the deadlines. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about those deadlines. So the first thing that you really want to think about is your USMLE timeline. So for many of you, you're either still in school or you've already graduated, you're doing training in your country, and you're thinking about this process. So the first thing that you're working towards is preparing for those USMLE exams, the United States Medical Licensing exams. Total of 4 tests that you're ultimately going to have to take. Step 1 takes by far the most amount of time. Step 1 is testing you on all of your basic sciences, everything that you learn the first years of medical school, and we'll talk more about all of the exams shortly. But it says anywhere from 3 to 12 months. Obviously, that's a big range, and this varies for everyone. Some students have a stronger basic science foundation than others, and that's going to dictate really how much time it takes you to score above average on these exams. Usually for our students to score above average, it's about 7 to 10 months of focused study for Step 1. Step 2 CK, which is your clinical knowledge, everything that you're learning the next years of medical school, about 3 to 9 months. Usually for our students, about 4 to 7 to score above average on Step 2 CK. Step 2 CS, which is your clinical skills, really your communication skills, about 1 to 2 months. You take your exams, you receive your ECFMG certification, and then you get ready to apply for the match. Like I said, the match happens once per year in March, and you're going to submit your applications in September. And then you start your residency training. You start working as a doctor in the hospital. Residency can be anywhere from 3 to 5 years. It depends on the specialty. And then you also have to take Step 3. We'll talk more about that. But international graduates can take Step 3 before they apply or when they're already in residency. So it's important to plan your USMLE timeline, but then it's also really important to plan your match calendar. Like I said, the match only happens one time a year. So if you're not ready to apply, it means that ultimately you're going to have to wait till that next year. So what I always tell students is you focus on Step 1, score above average, and then you start worrying about your Step 2 CK exam, Step 2 CS, and then finalizing your match calendar. So the year before you're going to apply in June, that's when you apply for a residency token. So basically you go on your ECFMG account and you say, I'm going to enter the match. They give you a token, and that you use to open up your ERAS application. So you'll start adding all your information, letters of recommendation will be uploaded, you'll work on your personal statement, and then you will get ready to start applying to programs in September. Now you can apply anytime, September, October, even into November, but the longer you wait to apply, the less likely your chances are at getting interviews. So the goal is by September, ready to apply, complete application. November through January is when you'll go on a majority of your interviews. February is when you submit your rank order list. So that just means all the places that you interview, you rank top to bottom. Where do you want to go most to least? And then the hospitals, they're ranking everyone that they interviewed. And then the match happens, and it fits doctors into residency programs. And then in March, you find out if you matched and where you matched. And then ultimately in July, you start working as a doctor in the your residency program. So March is obviously a very exciting time for our students. We're celebrating with a lot of our students. Obviously, right now, things are difficult with schools closing and students, everyone practicing their social distancing. So we can't have the usual match parties that we have, but we are still celebrating with our students that matched and that are excited about their medical future. So I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, well, what are my chances? How successful are international medical graduates in the match? This is the match rate from 2019, so this past year. And you can see they break it up into three categories: US seniors, people that went to medical school in the US, and then your international grads, like we talked about. US international grads and non-US international grads. So US seniors always have a high match rate, about 94%, and then you have international grads. You can see not much of a difference between the doctors that needed a visa and the doctors that didn't. About 59% of the doctors that entered the match were successful. And in 2020, they just released some early statistics, and the match rate even went up higher than that. It was about 61% for international graduates. So ultimately, these are pretty exciting statistics. These are the highest success rates that we've had for international medical graduates since 1993. So now more than ever, opportunity is there. More international graduates are matching than ever before, and we see a higher success rate that we've had in a really long time. These are things to be optimistic about. But then it can be quick to think, oh, well, it's getting easier. And that's the important thing to remember. It's not getting easier. It's as competitive as it's always been. The doctors that are taking their exams are doing well. They're getting experience. They have well-rounded applications. It just means that you have to make sure you're above average. Your application's above average. That's how you put yourself in a position to get interviews and get your spot. Below average, it makes getting those interviews that much more challenging. So how do I get those residency interviews? You have to get your application looked at. And that's the important part of this process to understand. The average residency program is getting about 900 applications for maybe 10 to 15 spots. So they do not have the time to go through every single person's application, look at your letters of recommendation, your personal statement, your experience. They just can't do that for every program. So what every program director does is they set up what they call filters. Now, the challenging part is every program is different. Every program sets their own criteria. So they asked the program directors in a survey, they asked over 1,200 program directors, of all the applications that you get, how many of them do you reject versus how many do you give a full in-depth review? And you can see it's about half. About half of the applications that get submitted get rejected. So they're not meeting the program criteria that they set. So every program is going to be different, but USMLE scores are always going to be one of those filters. So a program, maybe they get 900 applications and they say, okay, nobody below 230 on step 1, nobody below a 230 on step 2, nobody that failed any of their exams, nobody that graduated more than 10 years ago. Go. And then maybe the 900 becomes 400. Then they go to the rest of the application, look at your experience, your letters, your personal statement. Then they decide who to interview, and then they decide who to rank for their program. So understanding this process is really important. One, it's going to help make sure that you have an above average application, but also you want to make sure every part of your application is well done. Your letters of recommendation, your personal statement, every part of it you give time to make sure you're putting your best foot forward. The USMLE scores are obviously going to be one of the important factors in getting to that next level of the application process. So if you're an international medical graduate, you're taking USMLE, you're not thinking about just passing. You're thinking about how do I score above average. So for 2018, the average step one score for international medical graduate that matched, that was successful, 234. The average for those that were not successful, 221. So these have to be your goals. You're thinking 230, 235 or better, and you know you're putting yourself in a position to be above average. And remember I said it's not getting easier? Well, this is why it's not getting easier. 10 years ago, when the match rate was in the 40s, the low 40s, 221 was a pretty good score. Now that's the average score for those that are not matching. Again, you have to be thinking, how do I score above average? And I always tell students, I don't envy your schedules. I know it's difficult balancing school and work and family and preparing for these exams, potentially leaving your country. But just know that everything that you do to get a couple of extra points, it makes a big difference. Step two, about the same thing for step two, 240 for those that matched and 228 for those that didn't. Now, the better you do on USMLE, the better your odds become at getting into residency. So you can see from the 2018 match internal medicine, your chances of matching just based on your step one score. So you can see the better you do, the better your odds become. So you're really putting the chances into your own hands. International graduates with a 250 or better on step one had over a 90% chance of matching in internal medicine. And getting these scores is very possible. At Kaplan, we have what we call the Kaplan Medical Honor Society. It's just when we celebrate students that score above a 250, and every week we're adding new names to this list. So when you focus on your studies, the good thing about Kaplan is your scores don't lie to you. You know what your strengths are, you know what your weaknesses are. When you focus on your weak areas, that's how you really see your score jump. And here's a breakdown by specialty. So I'm sure a lot of you have an idea in your mind about what you're thinking about, and this will give you an idea what the most common international medical graduate specialties are, and then what you're really shooting for in terms of score to be competitive. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the USMLE exams. So like I said, USMLE stands for United States Medical Licensing Exams. These are the tests that every doctor has to take to be fully licensed in the US. The challenging part about USMLE is they don't just expect you to understand medical information. They want to really see your ability to integrate your knowledge across disciplines, across specialties, and apply that knowledge in a clinical situation. So success on USMLE is really not about memorization, it's about understanding the topics and concepts that they expect of you. So step one, like I said, testing you on all of your basic sciences, everything that you're learning the first years of medical school. It's an 8-hour exam. These are long tests. It's 7 blocks of questions, 280 questions maximum. This is a computer-based exam, so it's on the computer, multiple choice questions, and it's given all over the world. So you don't have to travel to the US to take it. You could take it in many countries around the world. The passing score right now is 194. You may have heard that there are talks about changing the exam to a pass-fail exam in 2022. Still have some time for that, but as of right now, no one is thinking about just passing. You're thinking about scoring above average. Step 2 CK is your clinical knowledge, everything that you're learning the next years of medical school. Same thing, computer-based exam, multiple choice questions given all over the world. It's a 9-hour exam. So these are long tests. Just as important as practicing for the exam, it's practicing your timing and your pacing for an 8 or a 9-hour day. You can't just go and do short quizzes and then show up and be prepared to do an 8 or 9-hour exam. You have to build up your stamina. At Kaplan, we give you 2 full-length Step 1 and Step 2 CK practice exams to do before your actual test. 1, of course, to see how close you are to your goals, but 2, to practice that timing and practice that pacing. Now, Step 2 CS is different. Step 2 CS is testing you on your clinical skills, really your communication skills. This is a live, patient-based exam where you are interacting with standardized patients who are actors and actresses who are trained to portray a particular disease. This exam is only given in the US. So this is one exam you have to travel for, and this is just a pass-fail exam, so you have to pass. So you go into 12 different rooms, and in each room is a standardized patient, and they're grading you on 3 things: your communication and interpersonal skills, your spoken English proficiency, and the physical exam that you do and the patient note that you type up. So this is a passable exam, but you have to be prepared. They're looking for you to do things a certain way. They're looking for things that are verbal and nonverbal. Did you knock on the door? Did you introduce yourself by name? Did you introduce the patient by name? Did you cover the patient before you do the physical exam? Did you wash your hands before the physical exam? All little things like that. So you have to have an order of operations and be prepared. And then finally, Step 3. Step 3 is all about long-term patient care, the unsupervised practice of medicine. This is a 2-day exam. Now, as I mentioned before, international graduates can take Step 3 before they apply or when they're already in residency. The benefit of doing it when you're already in residency is you're already in residency. You already have your job, so the score isn't so important. You just have to pass. The benefit of doing it before you apply is like we've been talking about. This is a competitive process. You want to make sure that your application is as strong as it can be. So having Step 3 done is something that program directors like to see. But it really comes down to your application. How much time do you have? How did the other exams go? And these are things that our advisors will help guide you on as you get closer to applying for residency. So what's the best way to get a high score on these exams? Best way to get a high score on USMLE is just to have a plan. It's too much information to just dive in on your own. I'm going to do a little bit of this. I'm going to watch these videos. I'm going to read this book. You have to have organization and structure to your time. So everyone's going to have a different level of availability. Maybe right now you only have a few hours a day, and then in a couple of months, that's when you're really going to dive into your studies. But structure yourself. 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, I'm going to cover a little bit of content. And then as you progress, you can start adding more and more as your schedule permits. But you want to really make sure you're being realistic with your schedule. Some people, they're in school or they're working, so you have to balance around your schedule. You want to approach content areas strategically, and that's 2 parts. 1, you want to focus on the most heavily tested topics and subjects, but 2, you want to focus on your own strengths and weaknesses. So you want to study what's most exam relevant, but you really want to focus on what my weak areas are. And that's really what successful USMLE preparation is all about, is identifying, where are my gaps in knowledge? Identify those gaps, fix them, and then you really move on. With Kaplan, you get thousands of questions to practice, and every question is going to give you an explanation of why the correct answer is correct, but why every incorrect answer is incorrect. So you really learn from your mistakes. And sometimes you'll do a quiz. You go through the explanations and you read the explanation and you say, okay, I made a mistake, I got that, I understand, and then you move on. Sometimes you read the question and you're confused, and that's when you need to go back to the content and really remediate that area. You want to have time for content and you want to have time for questions, and this is really important. A lot of times I see students prioritizing doing too many questions and not enough content. At Kaplan, you're always doing both. It's a balance of content and questions. In the beginning, it's heavier on the content. You're going through the material subject by subject and you're building your foundation. You're always doing questions, but more topical questions. You're studying anatomy, you're doing anatomy questions. You're studying biochemistry, you're doing biochemistry questions. As you progress your way through, it's less and less content and more simulating for the actual test and getting ready for the actual USMLE. And you want to learn from your mistakes. Anytime you do a quiz or a question, you don't want to move on to your next topic or your next quiz until you fully understand everything that you've just learned and go back to the content when you need to. And then you move on with your studies. So why Kaplan? Well, Kaplan, we're the world leader in USMLE preparation. For over 50 years, we've been helping students prepare for these exams and successfully get started with their residency programs in the US. So we have an amazing group of teachers that are from all over the world and all, experts in their field, teaching our programs, creating our content, and giving students access to the most high quality USMLE materials that are out there. We have flexible options, whether you want to study online from home or whether you want to come to the US and study at one of our Kaplan locations. So I want to encourage you, take advantage of everything that Kaplan has to offer. We have free events every month, free trials, free practice tests, different things that can get you started understanding where you are and experience some of what Kaplan has to offer. Take advantage of our local representative, Global Compass. Jill is a great representative who can help answer your questions and get you started with one of our Kaplan programs. She can put you in touch with one of our Kaplan advisors who can set up an appointment with you to talk about your plan, ask your questions, and really help you map out your plan for this journey. So again, I know this is a lot of information for today, but just know we are here to offer our support. We take things one step at a time, and that's how you really start navigating your journey towards medical residency in the US. So I want to thank everybody. I hope this was helpful. And don't be shy. Continue to ask your questions. We will answer them in the chat and look forward to talking with you all soon. Have a great rest of your day.